Assalamu alaikum everyone. Welcome to Meet My Mentor, where we connect you with qualified Muslim mentors from the My Muslim Mentors platform. Today I'm joined by a marriage coach, Mizan Abu Isa, also known as Advice with Mizan, who spent over a decade helping couples build stronger marriages rooted in Islamic guidance. Assalamu alaikum Mizan, how are you doing?
Hassan. Thanks for having me. I'm doing well, thank you. How about yourself?
Alhamdulillah, alhamdulillah, very well, thanks. All right, Mizan, let's get straight into it, inshallah. So just so our audience knows as well, how we're going to do it is I'm going to kind of uh, um, interview Mizan and also ask him some questions about how a marriage coaching session would look like with Coach Mizan as well. So, Mizan, tell us a little about yourself and the work you do helping couples.
Sure. Okay. So I actually have a bit of an interesting background. It's a combination of education, mentoring, as well as counseling. So that's my kind of like background. I've been building myself up for the last 20 years and really helping couples. It initially started off doing things informally and just generic advice and guidance to brothers that I knew, people that I met within the community. And then I found that over the years, I start seeing certain patterns whereby brothers in particular, they kind of didn't know how to navigate through marriage and relationships within their marriage. And that kind of just built up from there really for myself in terms of giving guidance and then moving from giving generic guidance to more informed, educational based, and then taking it more professionally, which I've done over the last 3 years now. So alhamdulillah. My main thing is to help couples, Muslim couples in particular, taking them from a bad patch and moving them towards a better and healthier type of relationship. And I always say to people, there's no such thing as a perfect marriage. There's nothing like a perfect marriage, right? We all have ups and downs, but we can have healthy and happy marriages, inshallah. And that's what I try and do.
Okay, nice, mashallah. I really like that, like what you just said there. There's no such thing as a perfect marriage. I think a lot of us need to kind of try and understand that, and it's probably something we always need to work on. I wanted to ask you as well, Mizan, what inspired you to start helping couples with marriage counseling?
That's an interesting question. I suppose my calling came a very long time ago. Again, when a friend of mine actually, he's a very close brother to me, and he was having marriage issues, and he confided in me and he spoke to me about his problems, and I realized that he just didn't understand the dynamics of male and female psychology, in particular when it comes to relationships. And because he was a close friend of mine, someone who's quite dear to me, and I felt compelled in actually helping him. And then I realized there were many other people in similar situations as him. And these are really, they're really good people, good brothers, good sisters, good husbands and wives, really. It's just that they've not really been taught, they've not been educated in how to deal with marital relationships, issues, um, affection, romance, intimacy, in-law dynamics, financial dynamics. So all the different types of things that makes up a marriage, no one's really taught them really. And so I suppose my calling came from helping a friend out and then realizing that actually I have mashallah, a certain understanding which I can offer to people. And I found that, alhamdulillah, mashallah, by the grace of Allah, that I have been able to help people in giving, back then from what was generic advice to now what is more professional led advice.
Okay, alhamdulillah. And I wanted to ask you as well, in your experience working with couples, what are some of the most common struggles Muslim marriages face today?
Some of I call it the big four. There's probably five, but what I usually call the big four, finding communication problems is a massive one. Not knowing how to communicate. The other one would be intimacy. The third one would be finance. Fourth would be in-laws. The fifth one will be abuse, but I don't really deal with abuse cases. but these are the major four that I actually deal with. But those are for people who are in long-term marriages. So for those who've been married for a number of years, 3, 4, 5, 10, 15 years. Okay, those are the main kind of things. But what's interesting is those who are newly married, within the first few months, some of the reoccurring things or the patterns that I tend to find and see is that they they did not prepare for marriage. That's a major issue. So lack of marital education, coaching or counseling, if you may. And another big issue is expectations, having a skewed or wrong or unrealistic expectation before entering into a marriage. So it depends. So if you've been married for long term, it'll be the big four which I mentioned, which is communication, intimacy, finance, and in-laws. But for those who are newlyweds, it's more to do with the lack of preparation for marriage and the unrealistic expectations.
I wanted to ask you as well, but you mentioned that number five you don't really deal with, which is abuse. Now, is that physical abuse or emotional? Because people will be thinking, which one they're talking about here?
So abuse, yeah, that's a good point. So abuse is quite varied from, verbal abuse to coercive, financial abuse, religious abuse, etc., all the way down to violence. I try to stay away from all of that. I don't tend to deal with those types of cases.
Okay, I see. Um, and what makes Islamic marriage guidance different from mainstream relationship advice?
The first and foremost thing is our relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's the main thing for us as Muslims. We have a different paradigm to the whole marriage and relationship dynamics. So when we get married, from our perspective, it's more about a journey to Allah, the Akhirah, and being with our spouse in Jannah, inshallah. So that's our foundation, if you like. And then that then will also give us guidance in terms of um, the marriage pertained upon the Quran and Sunnah, following the guidance from the Quran and Sunnah. So we have that underpinning as well, which kind of anchors us when it comes to our morality, our ethics, our accountability, responsibility, the rights of a husband and wife. So that's the main thing that sets Islamic, uh, marriage counseling separate to your generic mainstream marriage counseling.
Okay, alhamdulillah, fantastic. Coach Mizan, we're going to move on to the next part of our recording or session today. It's to do with the role play part. So I'm going to ask you some questions, which a potential client might even ask you, and
Yeah.
just so people get a flavor or feel of how it's going to be as in a coaching session with you. Here's my first question or first scenario. So, as the client, Hassan, a married man, I'm going to ask you this. My wife and I argue a lot about small things and we stop talking for days. How would you help a couple like us?
Okay, so in that particular given scenario, where husband and wife argue, and as a result of that, they stop talking for days. So this is what we potentially might call stonewalling, all right, where couples just ignore one another because perhaps they feel too overwhelmed in actually engaging with one another. Now, before the overwhelming part starts, we need to understand how do they communicate, and this is what I meant. That one of the major factors or one of the major reasons why people argue or have marital disputes is because of communication breakdown. No doubt there will be a communication breakdown somewhere, which then leads to them not wanting to talk to each other. So what I typically try and do is try to understand what is it that they argue about, what are the trigger points, what triggers one another, and it's good to understand, is it a thing or is it each other? And often it's probably both. It could be because maybe the wife is fed up because she wants the husband to do something and he's not, okay? Or the husband wants the wife to do something she's not doing, okay? And then from there, when they do start talking about it, they don't really talk. They start to belittle one another or use curse words, shout, raise their voice, use various non-verbal communications, gestures, which kind of antagonize or trigger the other person. And then before you know it, they just have this one big blown up argument, and then they stop talking and they just kind of move away from one another. So what I usually do is, so there are two parts to this. The first part is how do you communicate with one another, and then I'll just go through those types of things. Try to identify what triggers the husband, what triggers the wife. Try to then, it's almost educating and showing them how they must or how they should try and communicate with one another, what things to avoid. And I get a lot of their inputs. So I kind of facilitate this discussion, but a lot of the input comes from the couples themselves because I don't tell them how to act and behave because everyone has their way of doing things, but rather work with their strengths and what they want and enable the husband and the wife to understand each other. So I facilitate that process really. And so the communication part is the first thing that we'll look into. Then after that, when you argue, try not to ignore each other. Try to make time to come and talk to one another. So that's one of the things I do. Interestingly enough, actually, I've had couples who sometimes say, oh, yeah, it's from the Sunnah, I have up to 3 days. You've probably heard of this before, right? When you argue with someone, you have up to 3 days not to talk to them. This is a big misconception when it comes to husband and wife relationship. You know, for you to just say, oh, I have 3 days, and khalas, you go your way and I go my way. This is not a healthy relationship. This is not the correct understanding of, the application of this particular hadith here. Especially between husband and wife relationship, especially if you have children, especially if you live with in-laws and you have other people and other family added to the whole dynamics, okay? It can become very awkward, okay? Try to come back as soon as possible. Try to reconcile as soon as possible because the quicker you come back, the quicker you can work and make things better for you. The longer you leave the gap, the stronger the shaitan becomes in filling that gap. So I'll say to couples, don't leave it till 3 days, give it half an hour, go for a walk if you need to cool down. Don't make wudu, pray to rak'ah if you need to, if that helps, if that works for you. Okay? Or go and let off steam, go to the gym, go for a walk, go for a drive. Do what works for you, whatever your coping mechanism is. We can, I do talk with couples about their coping mechanisms, and then from there, they need to come back and talk, especially before bedtime, because then otherwise it gets really weird.
Um, I was going to ask you a follow-up question, but you answered it perfectly there, mashallah. Right, the next scenario I want to ask you, Coach Mizan, is here. We've been married for years, but we feel more like roommates than spouses. How do couples rebuild that type of emotional connection when they're in that rut or that kind of feeling?
Mhm. Okay. You give me some good scenarios. These are actually some very common issues that a lot of couples have actually, subhanAllah. Um, Intimacy is a big one. A lot of people within the Muslim community do not want to talk about this topic at all because it's taboo, they find it embarrassing. But the thing is, look, before I answer anything, look, in Islam, a relationship, a physical sexual relationship between a man and woman is haram all the time, except for under one condition, which is marriage. Okay? So that's the only time you can actually enjoy this type of action. Okay? And this is a natural desire that we have, to want to be intimate with one another. Okay? So what happens with couples is over a period of time, could be several months, could be several years, couples, they start to kind of build a wedge and start to move away from one another. Intimately, I'm talking about emotionally, intimately, and affectionately, they start to move away from one another. And there are various reasons as to why that can happen. Work, life, stress, health, financial problems, dealing with children, all sorts of issues. And what I usually do is try to identify the couples, what is it that's caused them to move apart? Because before they moved apart, they were once together when it was healthy. So I tried to get them to reflect on that first. When was it healthy? What made it healthy? What were they doing when it was healthy? So I'll get couples to remember those things again so they can just reconnect that thought into their minds. Because what happens is once they start to move apart, the relationship becomes stale, and believe it or not, husbands and wives actually start to feel a bit awkward. They start to feel like, oh, it's a bit icky. Oh, do I need to be romantic? And a lot of brothers, frown upon this term being romantic. But use a different term. Affectionate, being loving, being caring. Use a different term. Okay. But the point is, you need to show some type of affection to your wife, and vice versa. The wife needs to show some type of affection towards the husband, and this needs to rekindle. They need to start to rekindle the relationship again. So what I try and do is I try to remind them through discussions, what was it like when it was healthy? What things were they doing? Maybe they were going for walks. I don't know. Maybe they used to watch movies. Maybe they used to go on weekend trips. Maybe they used to cook together. Whatever it is, there's no real right or wrong here. It's what actually works for them. And so then from there, I try to say, well, I try to get them to think about, why did they move away from that? And what would they need to do in order for them to go back to doing that again? And then it's putting small, very small practical steps into place, getting them to rekindle that old memory again, basically. And then yeah, so then it just takes, several weeks of implementing some of these small but practical changes. And then hopefully, inshallah, they start to reignite things again. But the key thing is, don't stop making effort for your husband or for your wife, because that's what usually happens. The wedge appears because they stop making effort. And so what does effort look like? Again, that conversation when I have with couples, I ask them, what does it mean for when your wife makes an effort for you? What do you appreciate? And I ask the wife the same thing, what does it mean for you when your husband makes an effort for you, which you appreciate? And then again, it's about getting the two to understand what it is that they want from each other and then implementing it basically.
It sounds like you're talking a little bit about the love languages. There's like that famous book, Five Love Languages.
Yeah.
Does that come into this as well?
Oh yeah, definitely, definitely. So a lot of people like to talk about the love languages, which is it's actually very important. It's a good book to read. I would recommend people to read that book. So, you know, everyone has, love languages, but I mean, what people do is they get fixated with the five separate love languages. They just focus on one, okay? But the thing is, the reality is, we all resonate to all five of them. So, like words of affirmation, acts of services, quality time, giving gifts, and physical touch. So these are the five, okay? Now, husbands and wives they reciprocate well whenever any of these five are done, and they may have a preference towards one or two, but a healthy relationship should incorporate all five at some given point. And so, again, it's making efforts, isn't it? So, what does effort look like? So, let me give some practical examples. So, when it comes to spending time, this is a classic one because a lot of brothers actually don't understand what it means to spend quality time with their wife. So, often you might find women complaining, "Oh, you're never at home." And so the brother might think, well, okay, if I'm never at home, okay, this weekend I'm not going to go out with the boys. I'm not going to meet anyone. I'm not going to go outside. Also, I'll just stay home all weekend. And so in the mind of the man, he's thinking, my wife said I don't spend time with her, so I'm going to spend time at home. Now, he might be physically at home, but he may not be engaging with her. That's what I mean by quality time. So he might be watching TV, Netflix, scrolling on his phone, doing everything and anything except for spending quality time with his missus. So quality time would be sitting together and having meaningful conversations, having a cup of tea, sitting together and actually doing something together, husband and wife. Okay, it doesn't need to be intimate. It just needs to touch her emotionally, really. So then she feels like, yeah, he is there for me. He's not just an abstract person. All right, he's a real human being, an actual husband, and who's actually there for me. So that's how women feel. It's all about feelings for them, isn't it? And they feel like, yeah, he's present, and the presence of a man is very important to a woman. So that's just one example, really. Yeah.
Jazakallah khair. Okay, so Mizan, let's go on to another one, another scenario. So what I want to ask you next is how important is faith in fixing a marriage? So, can Islamic guidance actually solve modern marriage problems?
So I said that it can it was a bit echoey. So can Islamic guidance solve modern marriage problems? Is that what you said?
Yeah, yeah. So, how important is faith in fixing a marriage? Can Islamic guidance actually solve modern marriage problems? So, people might think like, "Oh, Islam's outdated" or something like that,
Yeah,
and it can't help me with my current issue. Whereas, I mean, what do you think about that?
that's good. That's actually a very important and pertinent question. I actually have two takes on this. As a practicing Muslim, I would say first things first, faith is very important. Without Islamic guidance, what do you have? Without Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, what do you have? Without the guidance from the Quran and Sunnah, what do you really have? Okay, so that's my answer as a practicing Muslim. Okay, now as a professional, I do also understand and acknowledge that I do get clients who are often non-practicing, sometimes non-Muslims as well. But I do get non-practicing clients. What I mean by non-practicing, I mean those who don't observe hijab, they don't pray, and they may not fast. So that's what I mean by non-practicing. So, I mean, I don't turn them away. They need help. I'm there to help and support them. I won't judge them. I would encourage them, I do actually encourage them, look towards Allah for guidance, pray together. I always encourage my clients, look, pray together. I have a little saying which I use sometimes, which some people might find a bit corny and cheesy, but I actually believe in it. I say couples who pray together, they stay together. And so I think people should really make an effort in actually praying together. So praying 2 rakat night prayer is what I encourage couples to do at times. Asking Allah to guide you to connect your hearts, because He is the connector of hearts ultimately, right? And it is from the qadr of Allah that you married your spouse, that Allah brought you together, okay, and through nikah, which is again, through the means of Islam, how husband and wife become halal for one another, right? Where the guardianship is taken away from the father and given to the husband, okay? So the deen is very important. And so from deen perspective, we have a framework. Islam has a framework which is very powerful. That framework is embodied in love, mercy, and affection. So having rahmah and mawadda is from the Quranic term, take towards one another. And then we also have our Islamic rights and responsibilities as well, the husband and the wife, which they give to one another. That framework is powerful because it gives us guidelines, and that guideline is from Allah. So from a practicing Muslim perspective, that's very important, and it's something that shouldn't be neglected. Now, I do need to add something on that. Even though I've spoken about, you know, uh, guidance in the Quran and Sunnah is very important, and it's needed, and help from Allah is very important, and praying together is very important. We need to also understand that, and this is where I think your question probably comes from. Sometimes people believe that Islamic guidance isn't enough. What they usually may mean by that is that they went and sought marriage counseling. I'm gone at that because it's not actually counseling, but going to maybe an Islamic judiciary board where they sat with imams and they've hashed it out, husband or wife have really, really, had it out with one another, and they've come out even more broken than ever before. Okay, unfortunately, subhanallah, it's because, with all due respect to the imams, they're religious people, they're people of knowledge, and we need them. They are very important. Okay, but they're not trained in marriage and relationships. Most of them aren't. Some of them are. We are now seeing some imams, mashallah, they are now getting trained in, relationship psychology and counseling, mashallah. But a vast majority of them aren't trained in that field. And then you got another dynamic of some of them can't probably speak English because they weren't born in this country. They don't understand the dynamics of relationship between younger people in this society. So you have now, layers of issues, and these are like what I would call blocks to a good session between a couple and the professional coming together who's trying to help them to stay together. And sometimes what scholars or students of knowledge, the type of advice that you may give are very black and white, very theoretical, not really practical, not really understanding the the relationship psychology, the emotional dynamics that each person is thinking and feeling and experiencing. And as a result of that, couples then feel as if Islamic counseling is not good. But what they haven't realized is they've gone to the wrong professional to seek help. And so they should really go to someone who's actually trained. Now, if they go to someone who's trained in relationship and relationship marriage and relationship psychology, but not grounded in Islam or they're not Muslims, they can come out with they can come out with ideas that are not very healthy for them. They could be given some very un-Islamic guidelines and advice, which is not very conducive to them, which is not befitting to their culture, their cultural mindset. And I'm using the word culture quite loosely and broadly here, meaning Islamic culture is what I'm referring to. So it's important that if you're a Muslim and you need help, you should go to a Muslim marriage counselor. And another thing I'd add today is don't go to a Muslim counselor who's a generic counselor. Go to someone who's trained in marriage and relationships because there's a big difference. It's like if you have a car problem, okay, there's something wrong with your engine, that you're going to go to the car body workshop. You see, one might say, oh yeah, it's still dealing with cars, right? No, but one deals with the bodywork and one deals with the engine. So you take your car to the right type of, um, car professional. So
Yeah,
yeah, it's a bit of a
absolutely.
long-winded answer, but I hope that kind of answered what you asked.
No, no, that's a fantastic answer, Jazakallah khair. It makes a lot of sense as well, with that, and especially the last part. I just want to add that obviously with My Muslim Mentors, the platform, it's a directory for we've got over 80 therapists and coaches on there, and like you said, they have pretty much a different niche and different speciality where they can help you
Hmm.
with. And like a lot of them are like yourself, Coach Mizan, where they're marriage experts, and then you've got others who are, anxiety and trauma and all these other types of experts basically on there. Yeah, Jazakallah khair for that. Moving on to the next scenario, wanted to ask you, what are the early signs a marriage is heading towards serious problems?
Some of the early signs, criticism, resentment, not wanting to talk to one another, no physical contact. Um, and when I say no physical contact, I would say the non-sexual type. There's no affection really, no hugs, no cuddles, no warmth in the relationship. So I would say these are some of the major signs actually.
Okay. Okay, Jazakallah khair. And for someone who's thinking about getting married, how would they prepare themselves to get married? What are the three things they should work on before entering marriage?
So before getting married, it's very important that the person actually understands that they are ready for marriage. So what does it mean to be a husband? What does it mean to be a wife from an Islamic perspective, first and foremost? Excuse me. So, and then actually seeing, if it's a guy, he needs to then understand, look, am I capable of taking care of another woman? So what does that translate into? That will translate into finances. Now, I'm not saying the man needs to be very rich. Okay, that's a very big misconception, by the way. There are thousands of people getting married who have basic average jobs. Okay, but having the sense of responsibility and accountability, that maturity, knowing what it means to take care of a woman who's going to be your wife, and vice versa, a woman knowing what it takes to take care of a husband who's going to be your husband. And then beyond that, having that right mindset that through this union you are going to have children, inshallah. And then, so are you then responsible enough to be a parent? So take it one next step further from our Islamic lens. So having that understanding, that maturity, if one is actually ready, really. Now, a lot of the times I used to hear this, I've heard this for many years and I still hear this now. A lot of brothers feel like they're ready to get married because maybe they attended a thick class somewhere and what the sheikh said, it's obligatory for you to get married if you can't control your urges, okay? And so the guy thinks, oh yeah, I need to get married now because I have urges. No, that's not that's not what I would say, okay? If a guy can't control his urges, then yeah, Islamically speaking, he needs to get married, okay? So then he can do things in a halal manner without violating the rules of Allah. However, if he is not ready mentally or financially or, or even spiritually, then he's not ready. He needs to work on those areas. So he needs to, again, it comes down to maturity, really. It's not, people, you don't get married just for that one thing, okay? There's a lot more to marriage than that one thing, if you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, just the kind of just want to mention as well that a lot of marriages end quite quickly as well. Sometimes because the person going into the marriage just wasn't ready. Their
Yeah.
expectations were elsewhere and maybe not realistic. Have you come across that in your sessions with people?
hmm I have a lot of times, especially in this day and age where people get married, they have a lot of unrealistic expectations prior to marriage. I mean, even before that, I have this whole thing about compatibility. Okay, a lot of people now getting married and they are not even compatible. A lot of guys and girls, girl meets boy meets girl, and fall in love, and maybe they've had a haram relationship. A lot of these marriages are happening like this. Okay, I know people don't want to talk about this, but this is the reality. And I deal with the reality. Okay, so a lot of relationships now, marriages now, it started off as a relationship. Then they made it halal by getting married. Now, as soon as they get married, one of the first things that the girl will say, or even the guy will be like, "Oh, you have changed." That's the very first thing they'll say. Now, what's changed? Now, when you get married, your real side comes out. You're living with someone now. Okay, your real side now comes out. You're not putting on your best front. Just when people have a haram relationship where girlfriend boyfriend dynamics, right? The guy's gonna look his best and speak his best when he goes to meet her. Vice versa, the girl's going to do the same thing too. They would say whatever they need to say to charm one another, right?
Yeah. It's dating, isn't it, really? Instead of living with someone.
That's right. And so then they think that's going to be their marital life, and that's one of the biggest misconceptions. That's the biggest lie they feed to each other. Okay, and then they start telling themselves, "No, actually, I'm going to live my life like this." But the reality is that's not who they really are. They are putting on a front with this person. They are putting their best foot forward with this person. Okay, but after they get married, then God's come down. I'm married now. I can relax. Okay, that's usually the mindset of people, isn't it? And that's when people turn around and say, often a lot of sisters will turn around and say to the husband, "Oh, you've changed. You never used to be like this before." But the reality is he hasn't changed. He's just shown you a version of him, a good version. Okay, when you were in that type of relationship prior to marriage. So that's again, that's another big problem. So then they get married now. Now the compatibility part is what I always focus on. A lot of couples get married without looking into if they really and truly are compatible. So think about this now. When a when people get married, when it's done through an arranged system, arranged marriage, not forced marriage, there's a difference. Okay? We can talk about that later if you want. But
Okay.
a guy and a girl are introduced, okay? And usually when families come together, they introduce one another. The the girl's father and her brother, and even the guy, his family members, they will find someone who aligns with their family values, that align with their backgrounds. Now, their background could be educational background, financial background, socio-economic backgrounds, could be cultural backgrounds, language backgrounds. So it's a whole array of things. Okay, and then they bring them together. The more closer aligned you are, the more compatible you are. And it's very important because when you aren't so compatible and you get into a marriage, and then after 6 months, 12 months, when the honeymoon period is all over, the least compatible you are, when you have an argument, you will have a very big bust up. And you tend to have more of a resentment and more of a hatred towards the other person because they don't understand you, you don't understand them. Now, how would you understand one another when you're not aligned? Okay, your compatibility is kind of, there's a big mismatch. Okay, so compatibility is often overlooked by a lot of people now when they get married in this day and age, and so that's a big thing. It's actually something that I do. So when couples reach out to me, well, not couples, but individuals before marriage, when they reach out to me, they often ask me, "I'm going to your marriage, can you kind of like assess this?" And compatibility checks is something that I do. Now it's ultimately up
Okay.
to the brother and the sister whether they choose to get married or not, but I help them with this compatibility factor.
That's really interesting, man, because obviously I think there's a hadith about it as well where marry from different tribes or something along those lines, get to know each other and marry from different tribes. And I can't remember the exact wording of the hadith, but it's along those lines, and it's really recommended in Islam to kind of to mix and get to know each other in that sense. And I think a lot of people when they're young and trying to get married, I know I was thinking like that when I was looking to get married, was like, look, I'm just going to marry anyone who's a good Muslim, right? That was my mentality. It didn't matter about cultural background and the rest of it. But you know what? After being, alhamdulillah, I've been married 14 years now, 15 years almost, and um, I'm grateful that my culture aligns a lot more with my wife than it would have if she wasn't from the same background as me, which is in my example British Pakistani basically. Because I mean we've already got cultural issues, even though like when just the fact we're not from the exact same tribe and all that kind of thing when it goes back to cultural Pakistani culture and all that kind of stuff, and that already causes problems. So I can only imagine bigger problems when you're not even from the same culture, country, race, ethnicity, and things like that. I can only imagine bigger problems. To be honest, I'm sorry to say it, that's just being realistic about the situation. Just after years of experience and going through problems already, then just having being a bit more grateful. To be honest, that I am in the situation I'm in. But it's very interesting. So, like in that session that you have with um, to check compatibility, like how does that work? So you've got two single, um, presuming Muslims come to you and say, "We want to get married. Can you check if we're compatible?" And like, how long? How does that work? Like, just generally, just a quick overview of how that would go down.
Yeah, sure. Um, so when they get in touch, we just run through over, what their backgrounds are. So I have like a criteria list that I go through, and so there are set questions that I ask them that look into a wide variety of things, from their religion, level of religiosity, madhab and akida. So these are religious factors. The upbringing, cultural backgrounds, language that they speak, the language of them. So culture is a big element, to their level of education, and also to see if they are more conservative or if they're more liberal. And so I'll go through a wide variety of factors, okay, and then based on that, then I'll say, okay, how much of that do you match with the other person? And then through that, they can then figure out, well, actually, we're quite close, we're quite aligned, or actually we're very, misaligned. But then ultimately it's down to them. I don't tell them what to do. That's not my job to tell them what to do. So, so going back to what you mentioned about that Quran verse about we've created nations and tribes so that they can come together and get to know one another. I have found that a lot of people would use that, and then they will try to promote interracial marriages. Now, this might be a bit controversial in saying this, but the reality is reality. I'm not opposed to interracial marriages, by the way, and it's permissible within our religion. But I think a lot of young people, inexperienced people, naive people would use this in order to promote interracial marriages. Now, let's take one step a little bit back, okay? Most people, generally speaking, not always, those who do push interracial marriages because they are already in the interracial haram relationship. So it suits them to push that narrative. Okay, usually speaking. Okay, yes, they might
Okay.
want to that may not. Okay, but generally speaking, okay, because it suits them because they want to get married. Okay. Now the thing is this: we have narrations that talk when the companions have spoken when they made hijrah from Makkah to Medina. Um, the Muhajirun and Ansar, the women were different in culture, even though the Arabs from Saudi Arabia, right? They had
Yeah,
differences, okay,
yeah.
and they knew those differences caused certain issues between them when they got married. And so that's gone back to the companions. So what about in our day and age when we are, not even from the same geographic location, we're from complete different, ethnically speaking, different geographic locations. What then? So it's an important factor to take into consideration. So what I usually tell couples who do get married, who are from very different backgrounds, ethnic backgrounds, is I say, look, learn the other person's culture as much as possible, embrace their culture as much as possible, number one. Number two, be willing to make compromises. Be willing to make compromises based on certain cultural practices that they may do and have. Okay. So it's very important because if you don't, then you are going to have clashes.
No, that makes a lot of sense. Okay, Mizan, let's move on to the next part, which is a quick fire round, right? I'm going to ask you some questions and I want you to give short and quick answers. So, get a bit more information out there for the audience. Okay, question number one. Uh, Biggest mistake couples make?
So biggest, it was big, the line was a bit broken then. So the biggest,
Biggest mistake couples make?
oh, stop trying, stop making an effort for one another.
Whoa, what you mean? Stop trying? Stop trying? Like, just don't make effort.
I think it's wanted a one word answer.
No, no, no. I need a bit more for
Yeah,
that. Yeah.
yes. So one of the biggest things that couples do is they stop making an effort. So people, when they
Right.
first get married, the honeymoon phase, why is it beautiful and glorious? Is because they're making so much effort for one another in pleasing
Okay.
one another, okay, in being there for one another, and caring and showing affection, love and kindness and rahmah, all the rest of it, okay? But after a while, what happens? That goes down until it disappears. So that's one
Okay.
of the biggest mistakes. They stop trying.
Okay, okay. Fantastic. Okay, next one. One habit that strengthens marriage.
Ooh, I would say kindness and respect, showing kindness and respect.
Nice. Fantastic. Okay, next one. One piece of advice from the Prophet ﷺ about marriage that people forget nowadays.
Would have been what I've mentioned before about kindness and respect.
Okay. All right. Okay,
Yeah,
brilliant. Last one. What makes a marriage last long term?
values, having values that are aligned with one another. Again, that goes back to the compatibility thing that I spoke about before. But having actual, so not just superficial things, not, oh, I like you, you like me, you look, good looking, oh, we like the same football team, we like the same Netflix, TV series. That's superficial stuff, okay? But go beyond that, go deeper than that, okay? So actual values that align with one another, because that's what will keep you aligned long term.
Um, I've also heard that having an aligned vision, like for your future self, for your children, and your goals, like having those aligned as well, does that help in
Hmm.
the marriage?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, yeah, same thing. So those are your values, aren't they? So your values will then determine how you raise your family, how you set your goals, your vision, and what your future will look like. So that's what your values will do. So having a strong identity, and I think actually I should have mentioned this before when you were asking me about preparation prior to marriage. It's very important, especially for a man, that he has a strong identity. He knows who he is because his strong identity will build his values, and those values is what will take his relationship long and far, inshallah.
Okay, inshallah. Brilliant. All right, Coach Mizan, that brings us to the end of my questions. If anybody else has any questions, you can, if you're watching, leave a comment and we'll try and respond to your comment and even pass the message or question on to Coach Mizan if possible. Now, Coach Mizan, how can like who should reach out to you for mentoring is what I want to ask you last.
Anyone really? I tend to mark myself as, a Muslim marriage coach slash counselor. But non-Muslims do reach out to me, and my only thing is with non-Muslims is I I encourage that they are married for me to actually help them out. Okay, but any married couples really who are having problems in the relationship, if they've been married for a little while and they've noticed there are certain things that just don't feel quite right and they need some type of external support, please reach out. I do promote getting help from your family members, but however, not all family members are suitable in giving you, impartial advice, unbiased advice. So seek a professional. So, reach out. Even if you aren't married and you're looking to get married, or you found someone you want to check compatibility, reach out. I help couples like that. One of the main things that I help couples deal with are communication. Intimacy is a big one, and also a taboo topic, but it affects so many Muslims, and nobody wants to talk about it. But I deal with this in a non-judgmental, professional way, inshallah, with understanding of Islamic haya. So, if you have these types of issues, reach out, inshallah.
Jazakallah khair. And also, you can find Coach Mizan on mymuslimmentors.com, where we can organize a session for you as well. And if anyone watching feels their marriage needs support, I would highly encourage them to get in touch with Coach Mizan, who can definitely help you. And also, like we discussed previously, if someone's looking to get married, then he can also, prepare you for marriage or the couple as well. One thing I would say as well is don't leave it until it's too late. If you've got problems, if you're seeing red flags, don't let those red flags become real before you reach out as well. Kind of, feel it out, have a session, even if you have a session by yourself without your spouse present, things like that, just to kind of get the advice that you need. And the thing is about having a therapist, a coach, a mentor to help you, other than your family and friends, is that it's an impartial person. It's somebody who you can speak to, who's not gonna judge you. He doesn't know you, or she doesn't know you, and it's might be easier to speak to that person than anybody else in your environment. Friends and family. So I would definitely always recommend it as a person who's themselves been through therapy as well, who thought it was a taboo and everything. But honestly, it's nothing but helpful, and I'd highly recommend it, inshallah. So yeah, Jazakallah khair, Coach Mizan. Any final words before we wrap it up?
Yeah, to couples, I would say, you know, don't stop trying with one another. Intimacy, don't neglect intimacy. When I talk about intimacy, I'm talking about non-sexual and sexual, both of them. They're very important. A lot of couples over the years, especially when they've been married for a few years and have a couple of children, that goes downhill. So work on those things. Um, just have kindness and respect. Honestly, kindness and respect goes such a long way. Uh, you know, so that's the Quranic conjunction of having, rahma and mawadda. Couples should have that between one another, really. So having that love, kindness, respect, mercy, being patient with one another. Um, those are the main things, really, inshallah. And if you are having any issues, please, reach out, whether to myself or to anybody else who you may, prefer, or get some help, because the last thing we want to see is, the breakdown of a marriage. Because when a marriage breaks down, it's not just the man and woman, but children are involved, external families are also involved. A whole community is ruined after a divorce. Now, I'm not saying that divorce isn't permissible. Divorce is allowed, if it's a very strenuous relationship. However, we want to preserve the marriage. We want to try and heal the marriage and then make it flourish again. So that's my main objective, and I suppose that's one of my motivational factors really, is to save marriages so that we can have a healthy, not just healthy family, but a healthy society as well, inshallah.
Jazakallah khair, Coach Mizan. Thank you very much for your time.
Sweet. Thanks for having me.